Shane Henson was working his usual shift at the Fauna Rescue Center in South Australia when he received an unexpected phone call from a local farmer. The farmer reported an unusual situation with his duck that was hatching eggs. Shane, who had been working for the Fauna Rescue South Australia group for 5 years, was used to caring for animals, but this phone call was unlike any he had received before. Shane's passion for animal welfare started when he was a teenager, and he volunteered at various animal shelters. Later, he discovered the Fauna Rescue South Australia group, which had been in operation for over 30 years in the area. While Shane still worked as a veterinarian, most of his free time was spent volunteering at the rescue center. His job involved giving advice, treating animals, and even making house calls to concerned citizens. On that particular day, Shane was manning the phones with 4 other volunteers, and they received over 15,000 calls annually. They dealt with various issues, including prank calls, wild animals in houses, and even one woman calling about her pregnancy when an ambulance was taking too long. Despite the various calls, they were able to help most callers. It was the end of August, the start of spring in Australia, and from the office, Shane could see some trees beginning to blossom. Little did he know what awaited him on the other side of the phone that evening. So when he heard the phone ringing, he was prepared for anything, or so he thought. Shane picked up, introduced the rescue center, and waited to hear how he could help. At first, the lady on the other end seemed a bit shy. She was quiet, sheepish, and vague in her descriptions. There was something about her duck at the farm, but despite the operator's questions, she wouldn't say exactly what was wrong with it. Eventually, she spat out a sentence that took Shane a while to process. "I think my duck has grown fur," she said with a weary voice. Then there were a few moments of silence. Shane was completely thrown off balance. Of all the things he expected her to say, that definitely wasn't one of them. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Shane asked, making sure that he had just heard what he thought he did. The lady repeated herself, and this time it puzzled him even more. He couldn't make sense of it. In her head, she went on to explain that she had been running her farm for decades and had never seen anything like it. But it was true. That morning she had looked into her duck's enclosure and was certain she had seen a layer of fur underneath her duck on its belly. Her eyesight may not be what it used to be, but there was no mistaking it. She had even reached in and touched it, and sure enough, it was fur. She knew he struggled to believe her, so she'd offered for Shane to come around and see for himself. The lady had called a number of other animal groups, but they all thought she was prank calling them. Shane was tempted to hang up too. He normally wouldn't investigate a case like this, but something about the lady struck a chord with him. She was well into her 60s and reminded him of his own mom, who had also grown up on a farm. When Shane Henson started his shift at the Fauna Rescue Center in South Australia, he expected a typical day of caring for animals, but a strange phone call surprised him. A local farmer reported something unusual that he had never seen before. The farmer's duck was hatching eggs, but it was what was underneath the duck that amazed him. Shane had heard some bizarre stories from his childhood, so he decided to check it out. His colleagues snickered when he told them about it, which made Shane even more skeptical. However, that didn't last too long. The next day, as promised, he visited the farm to investigate. If Shane had known what was waiting for him, he would have brought the entire team. When he arrived, Eliza, the lady who owned the farm, welcomed him. She introduced herself and offered him a drink, but Shane couldn't wait to see the duck. They walked to the duck pen together, and Eliza told him a few other puzzling details. This particular duck hadn't left its enclosure for almost a week. It had just laid eggs, and while the rest of its group went down to the creek to eat, she refused to move. Eliza had been forced to bring the duck food in a bowl so that she didn't starve. There was one big reason why the duck didn't budge from her nest, and Shane was eager to find out. As they neared the wooden enclosure, Shane could see the duck for himself. It was sitting in a dark corner, facing the wall. Its feathers were old and rugged, but the look in its eye told Shane that it was concentrating on something. "Now, what have we got here?" Shane asked as he bent down to take a closer look. He put on a glove before reaching out and touching the animal. The white feathers felt dry, but other than that, nothing looked out of the ordinary. As he slowly rolled the duck over to its side with one hand, a different color emerged. It was dark brown, and it was nothing like the white plumage lying just centimeters above it. Shane touched it with his other hand. This fur was thick, dense, and fluffy. It was nothing like a duck, and that's because it wasn't. The closer he looked and the further he rolled the duck over, the more features began to appear. First, he spotted a little claw, then a pointy ear, and eventually, a beady black eye. Shane couldn't believe what he was seeing. He let the duck back down before using a small flashlight to confirm what he had just seen. It was a baby, but of a completely different species. Eliza discovered that what she had thought was the fur of her duck was actually a possum. The possum had taken to the duck as if it were its mother, probably because it had been separated from its own mother. Although ducks typically don't care for other animals, this one clearly had a big heart. It was keeping the baby possum safe and sound, just like its own ducklings in the nest. It was a heartwarming tale of a mother's empathy extending to other children. However, Shane had some bad news for Eliza. He would have to separate the possum from its adopted mother because it just wouldn't work over the long run. They ate different food, had different sleeping times, and behaved in different ways. Staying in the duck's nest would mean certain death by starvation for the possum, and the ducklings themselves would have been in danger too. It was time to end that unexpected companionship. However, Shane offered to take the possum to the Fauna Rescue Center, where he promised that it would be taken care of. Eliza was feeling sad at the thought of her duck losing its child. The more they talked about it, the more they agreed that the duck had done an amazing job by keeping the possum alive for so long. Eliza only asked for one thing, if they could name it Daisy, after the duck who had saved it. And so, the Fauna Rescue Center adopted a new friend, Daisy the possum. The sweet duck had been mothering a nocturnal marsupial, way more closely related to kangaroos than birds. Fortunately, that situation turned out to be even better than they could have imagined. At her new home, Daisy quickly made friends with another orphan possum, and to this day, they are both getting stronger and stronger. When Eliza feeds the duck these days, she always checks the enclosure twice, just in case her humanitarian duck has taken in another animal in need. What animal did you think Shane would find in the duck's nest? Tell us in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe.